Hello and welcome to the Interpreting Wine Hospitality Podcast with me, your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. Welcoming you to this series celebrating the category of sherry. Released during Sherry Week 2019, this series will transport you to the region via conversations with Señor Beltrán Domecq of the Consejo Regulador and winemakers and owners of several bodega houses in the region. Sharing this information in podcast format, a first for the region. These 9 episodes will bust some myths about sherry that still exist in the marketplace and educate and attract a whole new audience of sherry drinker. So without further ado, here's today's episode of the series. Today's episode of the Sherry Week special features Eduardo Ojeda of Equipo Navazos. Equipo Navazos have a name for releasing interesting, exclusive, limited edition sherries. In this episode, we hear the origin story of Equipo Navazos and Eduardo's experience in the sherry world. He discusses the growth of Equipo Navazos and the sherry market in the context of their sherries, and how sherry will reach a younger audience in the future. I'm also very excited that the format of this episode returns to the very origins of interpreting wine, Eduardo preferring to be interviewed in Spanish, meaning that I have translated his words and give these voice in this episode, bringing his words and message to the world in English. Enjoy!
Bueno, yo soy un hombre nacido en Jerez, una persona nacida en Jerez.
So I was born and raised here in Jerez, and my family wasn't directly related with the world of wine. However, in the 1970s, the whole city of Jerez was deeply involved in wine. This environment, combined with my parents' love of wine, meant that I was very drawn to this world. And as I say, even though I didn't have direct access to the bodegas because I didn't come from a winemaking family, I had always wanted to be a chemist because it seemed the quickest way to work my way into the bodegas and be able to make wine. So I studied chemistry, and that is my education. Chemistry, biology, and other degrees that would help me on this path. So, fast forward, I have now worked and experienced 40 consecutive vintages. The coming vintage will be my 41st. And I have spent my whole career working in wine and making wine. I've worked mainly in 2 companies, always in Jerez and making sherry. The first 20 years in Croft, making Croft Original, principally for the British market. And then I went to work at José Estefes, where in 2000, José Estefes bought Valdespino, and I've been working there for 19 years. So my working life is perfectly divided in 2. Always, as I say, responsible for winemaking and all the technical and production details. As well as these 2 great experiences in parallel in my personal life, 14 years ago, having always loved gastronomy and eating out, I started another project called Equipo Navazos. As I said, it's a personal project which I started with Jesus Barquin, the other half of the team. And after 14 years, we feel very happy and proud because we have been sharing a very important message and have been an integral part of the revolution that is occurring in the world of sherry. So, in summary, my story, both personal and professional, is totally tied to Jerez and its wines.
Equipo Navazos es un proyecto hace 14 años.
So, to tell you more about Equipo Navazos and what it has become. As I mentioned, we began the project 14 years ago in 2005 when visiting an almacenista, which is a bodega that does not make wine, but rather focuses on the aging of wines. When there, we tried a wine which had been aging for 25 years, and it was incredible. At that time, there wasn't a comparable sherry in the market, and we decided to bottle it privately for ourselves. And it was as simple as that. So, with Jesus Barquin, my business partner in Equipo Navazos, we decided to buy a sherry butt, which is more commonly known as a cask in English, and which carries 500 litres of wine. And this gave us 700 bottles of wine. And because in reality this was way too much for the two of us to drink, we started to share this with friends. Initially, this was with 30 or 40 friends, people from all over Spain, food and drink writers, as well as foodies working outside of the sector. It really began as a personal project, and even on those first bottles, the label said, "Not for sale." In 2006, one of the people we shared the bottles with approached us, wanting to sell one of our sherries in his food shop. Our first reaction was that there wasn't sufficient structure in place to do so. However, we told him that if he was willing to sell the wines, then we would support the idea. And that was how it started. And it grew slowly, bit by bit. In 2007, one Fino, La Bota number 7, Equipo Navazos, was chosen by Wine Magazine and more than 60 sommeliers as the best Spanish wine of the year. And from there on, everything moved very quickly. Our Finos started being exported to New York, Singapore, Japan, and many countries. Even sometimes exported directly there before the local market. That is to say, the boom, probably not the right word, and greater awareness of Equipo Navazos started first overseas and then spread to Spain. I think the reason is that wines were very different, perhaps even radical, and at the start we weren't thinking in these wines from a business perspective. So the portfolio carried wines that were a little out of the ordinary, with personality. So the first ones to really get on board were the wine geeks. The first place to really get these wines was New York, and it's still a really important market. So now we can say, with 14 years perspective, that we're really proud to have been one of the catalysts for the current state of affairs in sherry, and to have built such brand awareness for Equipo Navazos sherries in the marketplace.
Y del reconocimiento que tiene Equipo Navazos y de lo que hemos hecho. Cuando antes comentaba que Equipo Navazos ha hecho vinos muy peculiares.
So, having established our place in the market, moving forward, we wanted to keep innovating. So, in 2008, we were the first ones to bring out an unfortified white wine. We have also brought out single vineyard wines from 2 specific sites, and at the moment we have 4 still wines, and while at the moment the market is open to this style, 15 years ago it was not so common. We have helped to recover this style of wine, I would say, and it really is recovery rather than invention, because in the past they used to make unfortified wines. At the same time, we have released aged wines with masses of concentration, and we've also released young, fresh manzanillas with a long finish, and they've been bottled in Burgundy bottles. In the end, Jerez can be difficult to be understood because the styles of wine that carry the brand are extremely diverse. So, as a region with such variety, we need a consumer with an open mind who wants to understand our production techniques and what they are drinking. and this is quite a niche audience. And of course, not everybody wants to go to this level of detail. So we need to have wines that are easier to understand, such as a young manzanilla. But don't forget that because of its aging, even a young sherry would be classified as a reserva in any other part of the world because they've been aging for at least 2 or 3 years. And even when I say a young manzanilla, somewhere else in the world, it would be a Gran Reserva. And another point, at the moment, young fruity wines are very popular, but naturally, when these tastes evolve towards wines with more complexity and aging, this is where sherry wines and manzanillas could take advantage. It's a complex wine, not for everybody, but I think once somebody understands this wine, I think they will be completely hooked forever.
Yeah, para siempre, ¿no? Para siempre, sí. Hombres, yo soy de los que veo la botella siempre medio llena y no medio vacía.
Thinking about the future for sherry, you know, I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And taking a step back from the sherry market, I think it's cyclical and that demand will increase and reduce in popularity over time. I look at sherry consumption in terms of intergenerational changes. So, for example, you may not drink the same wines that your grandparents were drinking, but it could be that by the next generation, tastes will have changed and that they will be drinking them again. But that's just my opinion, and the truth is, you never know. Sherry deserves its place as a top wine and holds its own at the top tables with some of the best wines in the world. And we've been doing this for more than 300 years. The only way to improve the current situation for sherry will be to keep making great wines that are artisanal and not mass-produced. Moreover, we need to keep stressing that sherry is a wine and have respect for the soil and terroir that gives us these grapes. The best way of doing this is to express the terroir and the soul of Jerez in every bottle. That way, every time that somebody drinks or even smells a sherry, they cannot help but imagine Jerez and the region. Look, I also appreciate that this will take time and that the bodegas need to sell sherries now and remain in business. However, I think collectively we need to think long-term and ensure that the history of the region is not lost. But look, I'm still optimistic that sherry will continue to be reborn and that the next generation and that your children will still be drinking sherry.
Renacer. Tu hijo beberá Jerez.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. An absolute pleasure to hear your story and the growth of Equipo Navazos, a project with a real cult following in all corners of the world. Do, of course, check out below for Equipo Navazos website and main social media handles. And while you're at it, head over to interpretingwine.com/listen for details of where to listen and, of course, to subscribe. And as this marks the halfway point of the Sherry series, please do let a sherry-loving friend know about the series and that there's much more great content to come. Next time on the series, in episode 330, it's a Williams and Humbert special showing the connections between Jerez and the wider world. See you next time.